Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Indians program. Today is the 10th session of the Geriatric Psychiatry module in Indians. Today's topic is anxiety and adjustment disorder in elderly. This will be covered by Dr. Ajit Dahale, sir, who is Associate Professor of
Good afternoon,
Psychiatry.
everyone. Welcome to today's Indians program.
Today, he is also a consultant in geriatric clinic and services. So, welcome you, sir. Without further ado, we'll begin the session.
Thank you, Dr. Chetan. So, welcome to today's program, and the outline of today's presentation would be first we'll discuss anxiety disorders, classification, etiological aspects, clinical aspects, management, and then we'll also discuss adjustment disorders. This discussion is mainly about features which are in elderly. So I won't be presenting in detail how to diagnose these disorders. And as we know, the literature on adjustment disorders is scarce. So whatever available information is there, I will be presenting. And most of this presentation is made from information which is available in Oxford Textbook of Old Age Psychiatry and PCNA on geriatric psychiatry. So I have given the references later in the end. So we'll start with classification and epidemiology of anxiety disorders. So as we can see here, the anxiety disorders are put into the group of neurotic stress related and somatoform disorders, with F40 covering phobia and F41 covering other, which includes panic, GAD, and unspecified disorders. F42 is for OCD, F43 is stress related. So in ICD-10, there is no separate age related specifier or modification in the criteria for the elderly. Similar is the thing for ICD-11 also, but the group of anxiety disorders has a separate, it has been given a separate group. OCD also has a separate group, unlike ICD-10 where it is clubbed together in neurotic disorders. So here in ICD-11, in the anxiety or fear related disorders, we have GAD, panic, agoraphobia, specific phobia, social anxiety disorder. Social phobia has been renamed, and addition of childhood anxiety conditions, which is separation anxiety disorder and selective mutism. And the differentiating features between these are based on the foci of apprehension. So now coming to the epidemiology in elderly, the prevalence rates as per studies fall after 50 years of age. And the reason for this, there may be multiple reasons. And one question which has been put is that are the diagnostic interviews not suitable for elderly as compared to the other adult group? So is that the reason for this fall? There are different reasons. In future slide also I have mentioned some of the reasons. And the rates are relatively higher in females in later life as well. In adults as well as elder adults, the rates are higher in females, but the gap between males and females narrows down with aging. And prevalence rates for anxiety disorders in late age range from 3 to 14%. This is current prevalence or 12-month prevalence studies. It is better to do current or 12-month prevalence studies in elderly because otherwise cumulative anxiety disorders of whole age may add up to the prevalence rates. So we will take two studies here. First is this Australian survey which was done in 2007 in community, and where they found the 12-month prevalence in elderly of GAD to be 1.5%. All the disorders were between around 1%, and any disorder was 6%. For elderly having any anxiety disorder, the prevalence was 6%, which is nearly 1/3 or 70% less compared to the adult age group. So this is an Australian data. So now we'll compare it to our Indian data, which is from National Mental Health Survey of India 2015-16. So in this study, what they have found, so the neurotic disorders, the current point prevalence was noted to be 3.3%, and in which GAD was 0.5% and phobic anxiety was 1.7%. So these are comparable to whatever was found in Australian studies. And neurotic disorders, in this study also they found that the peak was between 40 to 49 years, like other studies. So that after 50 years of age, the prevalence starts coming down. And in this study, they have found that the total neurotic disorders were maximum in that 40 to 49 age, and it was 4.4%. So we can see that there is 25% reduction in prevalence between elderly and adults. Elderly are 3.3%, and adults are non-elderly adults are 4.4%. So this is the prevalence data from India, which is across multiple states. This survey was done, and we can see that GAD is 0.5%, and both of them are near around 1%. Lifetime prevalence also is nearing the current prevalence in this study. So now other features of epidemiology in elderly is that those having other health problems, there is higher prevalence. Also anxiety occurs commonly in context of mild cognitive impairment, and it is being considered that it may be a part of prodrome of dementia. One of the studies also have found that there is association between severity of anxiety in elderly with amyloid load in the PET scans which were done in people who were not having dementia. And prevalence of 5 to 21% was noted of anxiety disorders was noted in neurocognitive disorders, that is cognitive decline. Up to 21% people can have coexisting anxiety problem. Now coming to the factors, these are etiological or factors which contribute to generation of anxiety in elderly. So there are biological factors, as we know that limbic system is most involved in anxiety at any age group, which limbic system consisting of amygdala, insular cortex, cingulate cortex, and hippocampus. Anxiety is considered to be evolutionary mechanism, protective mechanism, but in some people it may become a hindrance and pathological and leading to difficulties. So amygdala is noted to be hardwired for anxiety response, and this response is difficult to extinguish. Also, other thing which is associated with anxiety is hippocampal volume and hippocampal neurogenesis. These are involved in stress response, and if these are low, then that can predict that there is higher chance of developing anxiety. Risk variation for anxiety disorder due to genetic origin is around 30 to 40%. And We may feel that in elderly anxiety, these may not be working, but genetic effects do operate strongly in late life anxiety also. And there are even additional midlife and late life genetic influence in females. Yeah. So now coming to the psychological and social factors which have been studied, which include trait anxiety. These are similar to the young age group, that is high neuroticism, high conscientiousness, and low extraversion. These are related to most of the anxiety disorders. Avoidance behavior, childhood abuse and neglect is even a contributing factor for elderly anxiety. In psychodynamic theories, what has been given is repression of emotions related to aggressive emotion and emotions related to sexuality can lead to development of anxiety. And social factors in elderly are health decline, retirement, and uh, isolation, which is a very prominent factor connected to decline of cognition and mood decline. So these are the psychosocial factors involved. Now coming to the clinical aspects which are noted in elderly. So as is known that anxiety can present diversely with mental, cognitive and physical symptoms. In elderly, somatic or physical symptoms are much more, and elderly generally are less able than young adults to identify symptoms of anxiety accurately. They are also elderly are also more likely to minimize psychological symptoms, and all these together can lead to difficulty in differentiating anxiety among elderly people from general medical conditions. I'll be mentioning about general medical conditions which can affect anxiety detection or course in future slides. So one uh, aspect of anxiety which has which is important to discuss is worry. Worry is conceptualized as an cognitive and emotional attempt to solve feared events with uncertain outcomes. So now in elderly, what worry content generally is about their own is about own health as well as welfare or loss of loved ones. Also, the worry content can be about life transition, retirement, and caregiving responsibilities, as well as economic and legal issues like reduced income, increased healthcare cost, and end of life planning. So these can be the worry content in elderly. And like what I earlier noted, that the anxiety prevalence reduces with age. So worry also reduces with age, and this may be due to factors like with age there is increased emotional regulation, the daily demands which are there on an individual change with aging, the demands generally reduce with aging. There is increase in cognitive habituation to the anxiety or worry and cohort effects. But it can also be due to data loss due to premature institutionalization or death of those who are excessive worriers. So these people may not get counted into the elderly who are being studied. Also, as I had mentioned earlier, if the assessment measures are not appropriate for elderly, that itself also can lead to uh, less detection of less prevalence of anxiety or worry in elderly. Now, yeah. So now we will discuss about avoidance behaviors. So this is part of response to anxiety. Avoidance is a part of one aspect which I mentioned was worry. Now this is another aspect of anxiety is avoidance behavior, and it can take different forms in elderly. Like elderly may decline social invitation, only leave home in company of others, not watch news or avoid talking about certain topics. And for these uh, avoidance behaviors, they may use physical complaints as reasons. And clinicians also may misinterpret this as an inevitable consequence of aging or retirement, whereas it may be actually not related to that, but a symptom of pathological anxiety. So these kind of behaviors have to be noted along with the usual symptoms. And these avoidance behaviors may actually be unknowingly supported by well-meaning caregivers, where caregivers may try to compensate for uh, whatever restrictions elderly people are bringing in their activities. So unknowingly, avoidance may be exacerbated by caregivers themselves. And dependency, which with aging is noted, may actually be a expression of avoidance behavior. So we have to be very careful while examining, taking history about avoidance behaviors. Yeah. So now coming to these were about anxiety in general in elderly clinical aspects. Now with individual disorders, are there any differences or anything specific? So in panic disorder, elderly are more likely to be seen in emergency department, as panic can mimic acute coronary syndrome or asthma attack. And it has been noted in a study that the elderly have fewer panic symptoms, they have better functioning and less severe depressive symptoms, comorbid. In social phobia, compared to the young adults, elderly may not report for treatment, as this social phobia may not cause them significant disability in view of reduced socio-occupational demands. Now, in GAD, it has been noted that the worry content in those having GAD is similar to those without GAD, but with greater frequency and disability. The worry content I have noted in previous slides. And coming to specific phobia, so like social phobia, this also may not be a focus of therapeutic attention because of less distress and disability, and because elderly often are able to avoid the phobic stimuli. So one type of specific phobia which is more common in elderly and which is fear of falling. It has a combination of features of specific phobia and agoraphobia, where a person has fear that he may fall, but when there is less likelihood of same. And the prevalence of this is around 12 to 65%, and even higher rates in those having history of falls. And for information of audience, as per a study, each year 30% of elderly have experience fall, which may not be major, but a proportion of that may be significantly injury causing fall. So 30% of elderly experience fall every year. And this prevalence of fear of falling increases with age. And the problem with this specific phobia, that is fear of falling, is that it itself increases the risk of fall. That's why it needs attention and treatment. And yeah, like I noted, fear of falling is linked to reduced self-efficacy for managing falls and lower balance confidence. And it is associated with disability, hence it should be assessed for and treated. So now coming to other clinical aspect more importantly for elderly is multimorbidity. So it is noted that anxiety disorders are more common among people suffering from chronic medical disease, and the number of illnesses is positively associated with presence of anxiety. So more the illnesses, more is the likelihood of presence of anxiety. And as one study has noted it that it increases to risk by 2 times having more than one medical illness. In palliative care settings, prevalence of anxiety can be as high as 25% of the uh, patients undergoing palliative care may have anxiety, as compared to what we earlier noticed was only 3% is the prevalence, 3 to 6% if we accept the Australian findings also. And treatment gets complicated when there is multimorbidity because of co-occurring medical complexities. To manage multiple disorders, their medications, overlapping symptoms, and uncertainty about disease prognosis, about the medical condition whose disease prognosis may not be clear, and the sustained worry about how this illness, the medical illness in palliative or palliative care, can affect the financial, personal, and social circumstances. So, in palliative care, it is much more complicated to deal anxiety disorders, and so also is in the situation with multimorbidity. So, overall impact of anxiety on elderly is more physical disability, more risk of cognitive decline, poorer quality of life and satisfaction, more feeling of loneliness, as well as more use of healthcare services. So now coming to the assessment. So what is to be done during assessing elderly to detect anxiety and so that it can be managed well. So all psychiatric assessment interviews should include screening questions for anxiety symptoms. So we should check when we assess elderly for any psychiatric, if they are, even if they are not presenting with anxiety symptoms, it is not their chief complaint, still we should check with them about their worries, fears, panic, and obsessions. Avoidance behaviors which have been noted earlier to be checked. To check, we need to check for stressors and anxiety associated with that. These are two assessment tools which are been designed for elderly, that is short anxiety screening test and geriatric anxiety inventory. These can be used for elderly for assessment of anxiety. And we need to assess for substance abuse, that is alcohol and benzodiazepines more specifically, because they have bidirectional relationship with anxiety, as we know, and elderly tend to misuse them. And alcohol and benzodiazepine abuse can lead to anxiety, and their withdrawal also can lead to anxiety. And for anxiety, self-medication may happen in form of alcohol and benzodiazepines. So now coming to the medical conditions which we need to check to rule out these conditions contributing to anxiety. The conditions are hyperthyroidism, asthma, COPD, arrhythmias, acute coronary syndromes. They themselves can present as anxiety disorders. seizures, vestibular disorders, hypoglycemic attacks, anemia, and rare, these are the carcinoid and pheochromocytoma are rare things, but we need to, there are many more, but these are the initial few are common conditions where we need to check, rule out these to avoid misdiagnosing. And as well as if both are there, then at least one contributing factor can be resolved through treating these conditions. And also we have to check the medicines which can be associated with anxiety. These are sympathomimetics, then steroids, antihistaminics, caffeine. Caffeine is used in a lot of cold medicines, thyroid hormones. Then the medicines which we use commonly, SSRIs and SNRIs, initial days, they can lead to worsening of anxiety. Amphetamines, if they are being prescribed. Antipsychotics due to akathisia can cause anxiety. So that also has to be kept in mind. Otherwise, we may unnecessarily give another medicine instead of sorting out side effects of medicines which we have. So these are medicines which we have to look for if somebody is having anxiety. Then other things which we need to do is physical examination, which will contribute to getting to know. Investigations should include hemogram, sugar, electrolytes, thyroid function, renal liver function tests. Vitamin B12 deficiency and folate deficiency should be checked because both are very important for neuronal health, and deficiency can contribute to anxiety and depressive symptoms. More depressive symptoms, but anxiety symptoms can also be present. ECG to rule out any cardiac issues, and also before we start any psychotropics, better to have, especially in elderly, to have ECG. And neuroimaging can be done in person having anxiety symptoms if there is any pointer for structural lesion, or if there are any changes are suspected due to coexisting other symptoms. Coming to management of anxiety in elderly, so before we give any medicine or therapy, we should sort out if there is any misuse or abuse of substances like nicotine, caffeine, or alcohol. Managing use of medications and medical conditions which can lead to anxiety or are associated with anxiety. Encouraging physical activity, sleep hygiene, and diet. So in diet, we have to see that the things which are mentioned above, and the diet which is healthy for brain health in general should be advocated, which has more of high fiber and using more dry fruits, more leafy vegetables and legumes and grains, and low processed food, low rice, sugar, and low medium or low, not a low carbohydrate, but medium use of carbohydrate, because these also can contribute to poor brain health, and then that itself can make a person susceptible for anxiety or any mental health and neurological symptoms. Coming to psychological interventions, first thing which can sort out a lot of issues would be health education, educating about what is anxiety, what are the contributing factors, and sorting out issues mentioned in the previous slides. That itself can take care of a good amount of anxiety. If still issues persist, then supportive therapy, relaxation training, cognitive behavior therapy, or only behavior therapy, because sometimes cognitive aspects may not be possible. In situations where anxiety is associated with grief or relationship issues, role transition, isolation, interpersonal therapy would be a good method to consider. Family counseling and problem solving therapy also would be useful, because the family is not clearly aware of what is happening, their approach also may not be very helpful. And So that's why their involvement is also required. So this is about how the treatment can reach more and more effectively towards the elderly. So this is for the psychological interventions and can be involved in pharmacological interventions. But for psychological interventions, trying to incorporate these into primary care setting or home-based setting and community setting may improve opportunities to increase the treatment engagement for older adults. So there may be less treatment dropouts if we try to incorporate uh, into primary care or home-based setting. Telephone-based treatments, internet-delivered treatments, and self-guided interventions are some of the ways which we can have better reach and improve uh, attrition as well as effectiveness. And also including larger and diverse interdisciplinary workforce, that is uh, the primary care health worker and others, nursing or social worker, they can be involved and to deliver some of the psychological interventions wherever there is lack of resources. And the therapy wise, acceptance and commitment therapy, mindfulness based therapy, which these focus more on psychological flexibility, and these would actually benefit in finding acceptance towards life experiences that are non-modifiable. And this is quite pertinent in elderly because situations like worsening health and shifts in gains and losses in elder age. So here psychological flexibility and acceptance would be very useful. So these strategies can be used when the therapy is being happening, being done. Coming to pharmacological interventions, these should be kept as minimum as possible, considering that elderly are at much higher risk for side effects. And so now coming to specific phobia, medications are generally unhelpful, but can be tried for short term. For other conditions, benzodiazepines can be tried because they have been noted to have short term efficacy, and 2 to 4 weeks use is advised. What we need to watch for is paradoxical agitation, withdrawal symptoms on abrupt stopping, confusion and amnesia, as well as risk for fall, which is there is pre-existing risk for fall in the elderly otherwise also. So benzodiazepines may worsen that risk. So that has to be educated also, and so people should take extra caution while prescribing. Next group of medicines which would be preferable over benzodiazepines, that is SSRIs. As per UK guidelines, we should monitor for QT interval prolongation, QTC, in if we are giving escitalopram more than 10 mg, like that. Also, we should monitor for hyponatremia and initial worsening of anxiety and falls. Bleeding tendency is a major issue, especially in elderly. There is a lot of studies have noted that the GI as well as non-GI bleeding risk in people who take anticoagulants and antidepressants increases up to 2 times. But there is one study from Sweden where they have not found increased hospitalization for any bleeding tendency in this combination. But other studies have found that the bleeding risk does increase if we are combining SSRIs with anticoagulants, or if we are combining SSRIs with medicines like aspirin, which are commonly present in elderly people prescriptions. So that is a very important point. We should be careful. Probably we should give lower dosages and avoid as much as possible. In SSRIs, paroxetine, as we know, has anticholinergic effects and hence is less favored in elderly because of cognitive risk, and fluoxetine because of drug interactions and long half-life. Other medicines among TCAs, if we have to use, is nortriptyline because of its side effect profile. Agomelatine is one medicine which has been noted, uh, which can be tried because of its helpful effects on sleep also, and it doesn't have benzodiazepine-like action, but it acts on melatonin receptors. That is one medicine which can be tried in elderly having anxiety. Other medications which can be tried, again here the precautions like QT interval and other side effects has to be taken care of. One is quetiapine in among antipsychotics and anticonvulsants. We have to medicines which can be given are pregabalin and gabapentin. So this is about anxiety disorders. Yeah. So to conclude, for anxiety disorders, they are prevalent and they lead to dissatisfaction and disability. Comprehensive assessment is very important because there are multiple factors which will contribute, and otherwise if we just give medicine, problem may have partial resolution. So if we try to sort out other contributing factors, maximum possible improvement uh, can happen. Psychological intervention should be preferred, and innovative care approaches can increase acceptability as well as efficacy of the treatment. Management aspects in elderly for anxiety treatment research is quite low. So most of the data is like for the usual adults, whatever data is there, we study from that, and there are some few trials are there in elderly. Most of them are for GED. So now coming to adjustment disorder, this is in elderly. So adjustment disorders are the probably they are seventh most commonly diagnosed disorders, but they are the probably one of the most ignored, neglected disorders in this classificatory system because of the way they have been conceptualized or the criteria. So in ICD-10, it comes at F43.2, and diagnosis depends on careful evaluation of relationship between form, content, severity of symptoms, previous history and personality, and stressful factors. So reading this, we can understand why this research is so less. Despite being diagnosed commonly, it is very vague uh, definition, diagnostic guideline. In ICD-11, they have tried to make it more focused, which is the criteria have been modified, and preoccupation with the stressor and failure to adapt to the stressor have been given emphasis, and impairment criteria is there for everywhere. Onset should be within 1 month of stressor. So two main changes, two main things which they have focused in ICD-11 for adjustment disorders is preoccupation with stressor and failure to adapt. So in ICD-11 questionnaire, which is ADNM questionnaire, there are types of stressors which have been mentioned which can lead to, this is not exhaustive list, but these are the common stressors which are associated with, can be associated with adjustment disorders, which include divorce, separation, conflict, death, illness, retirement, unemployment, too much, too little work, time pressure to finish work. It may be at home or at workplace. Shifting to a new place, financial problems, illness, serious accident, assault, and termination of important leisure activity. Like if somebody is not able to suddenly continue the activity, like hobby, like music, something which is passion for somebody, that itself can act as a stressor. Yeah, like noted earlier, it is highly ignored diagnostic category, and sometimes it's not known, seen even in textbooks. And some diagnostic schedules also doesn't have adjustment disorder for diagnosing it. It is a diagnosis of exclusion, and that's why research is very less. ICD-11 is trying to promote clarity and research. So prevalence in elderly, as per the primary care and community survey results, is around 2.4%, and it adds with aging, it is noted to be higher. And out of these, less than 10% use healthcare. So most of the people with adjustment disorder don't use any healthcare services. So there is one French study which studied in detail uh, adjustment disorder among elderly, and they found that and anxiety, they discussed combination of adjustment disorder with anxiety symptoms only, and they found a point prevalence of 3.7%, and 40% had a comorbid other psychiatric condition, and most frequently reported stressful life event was personal illness, and more than 50% were markedly were significantly disabled by the symptoms. And those who were consulting primary care physicians, they were older, had lesser scores on anxiety rating, and benefited less from non-pharmacological management. Yeah, so this shows that the anxiety disorder prevalence may be between 2 to 4%, because the other studies have noted it by 2.4, and here it is 3.7. And it depends on where it is being assessed. Is it primary care? In this study, it was both primary as well as psychiatric setting. Earlier, it was only primary care. So there is no specific data for anxiety adjustment disorder treatment, and generally psychotherapy and general measures about lifestyle, medical conditions, medicines as sleep, hygiene. These are the first line, and health education. Short-term medicines can be considered benzodiazepines, SSRIs. If the symptoms are prominent, then SSRIs can be used. And then we have to also assess if it is just adjustment disorder or is it progressing to depression or anxiety disorder as such. Now we'll briefly talk about COVID-19 and elderly, because anxiety and adjustment can be a manifestation of uh, COVID-19 for elderly especially. COVID-19 is a multifaceted stressor, and which can affect why it is multifaceted, because there is worry about health of self and others, there is social isolation, there is constant information overload, and fear generation from media. As we know that a lot of behaviors from people can lead to stigmatization of because of COVID. Elderly have limitations. Not all elderly, but a lot of elderly will have limitations in use of digital technology. When they are socially isolated, they need to use digital technology, and they may not be that equipped. So that itself can act as a stressor. Because of lockdown and other financial constraints have are there, and access to healthcare is generally difficult for elderly, and COVID related things have made it even more difficult. So COVID has not just created stressors, but it has amplified pre-existing stressors also. So how, so there are very less actual studies. I could find 3 studies as such about anxiety and depression. So one China study found that 37% of elderly who were assessed, they are not COVID positive, but they are elderly general population. They reported anxiety and depression. A Brazilian study which actual number is 500, but till now only 72 have been recruited. So they found 38% subjects having exacerbation of pre-existing symptoms and 21% having new onset symptoms. But one good finding was that these symptoms were subsyndromal. So they have noted that it was of when they used diagnostic interviews, the severity of symptoms was like questionable diagnosis or subsyndromal. In Spain, they found that the older adults showed less emotional distress compared to the younger participants, and there was no gender difference in that. In NIMHANS, the geriatric clinic has done a study about emergency department visits where the study has found that there is notable increase in elderly people visiting with psychiatric symptoms during COVID times as compared to the previous times, despite there being lockdown and restrictions in travel. So the management in COVID related anxiety or adjustment is similar, and as I have noted earlier, with inclusion of innovative methods like telephonic uh, care or internet based care or involvement of primary care physicians or non uh, uh, healthcare workers, which like social worker, this kind of innovative or non-usual methods have to be used for management considering the restrictions. So this is the last slide, and after that this are the references. Mainly it is Oxford textbook and PCNA and other studies which I have mentioned. And this is the National Mental Health Survey, which all psychiatry residents should read. Yeah, these are the COVID related studies. Thanks. Thank you. And if there are any questions, I think I can take.
Now the session is open for discussion. So if you have any questions, then you can type in the chat. We'll unmute your mic and then you can ask the questions.
Ajit, I also put it in chat for the others that the National Mental Health Survey elderly data is just being published in the next month's Asian Journal of Psychiatry. So I've just given the quote there. You may not have seen it because it just come out last week.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Does any of the audience have any questions? I think there are no more questions. If there are no more questions, shall we end the session, sir?
Yeah, yeah.
Matthew, sir, do you have any more comments on this, sir?
No, nothing else. I think Ajit, that's a good presentation, and I'm sure it's available on YouTube, and that's the reason why a lot of people are not here and they don't ask questions. I think YouTube is watched quite a bit, isn't it?
Yes.
So a lot of people watch it. Even practitioners from the psychiatric fraternity. Thanks a lot, Ajit.
Thanks.
And over to you, Chetan.
Yeah. So there's one question in YouTube by Dr. Shilpa Shri Ravikumar. Keeping in mind regarding bleeding risk, can we use pregabalin as an anxiolytic? But orthostatic hypotension is the person's concern.
Pregabalin can be used, but it has its own side effects. So if there is a clear bleeding risk is noted, then we can try. But if we don't have adequate information on the bleeding risk, then better to give SSRIs only. But if there is somebody is on anticoagulants and had a bleeding event, then better, yeah, we can try pregabalin. But I have not read about bleeding risk related to pregabalin. Earlier, it was thought that mirtazapine and bupropion have less bleeding risk, but recent studies are finding that they are also comparable to other antidepressants. So pregabalin, it needs to be checked what is the bleeding risk for that also.
Why not benzodiazepines itself, Ajit?
Yes, that.
Why to go for pregabalin, which has got more side effects than benzodiazepines?
Yeah, benzodiazepines can be, yeah, that there. So I think we can use benzodiazepines even instead of SSRIs in adjustment disorder. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, though we say generally don't give benzodiazepines in elderly, there is really no absolute contraindication. Sometimes
yes,
benzodiazepines are much better if you're using short-acting and very low doses. Much better than the complications of SSRIs and antipsychotics and others. So
yes,
benzodiazepines should be used short time, short dose, short duration of treatment and short half-life. Clonazepam, something like this. A lot of elderly take alprazolam.
yeah.
A lot of physicians,
yeah,
a lot of elderly who just prescribe each other or they prescribe by the alprazolam. Exit is one big, very
Exit is very common.
Yes.
And probably peer influence is there for Exit.
They give Exit to each other. Really. Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the discussion, and thank you, Ajit, sir, for your presentation. This session is also available live in YouTube. It will be made available in another couple of minutes in the YouTube. All the other sessions of geriatric psychiatry and other modules are also available in our YouTube channel, Nimans Indians. Kindly subscribe to our channel. This session was also done with the help of academic grants from Linux Laboratories, Chennai. So we thank one and all. Next week we'll next Saturday we'll meet you with another session from geriatric psychiatry. Thank you one and all. We'll be ending the session for all now.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.